At QA Stories, we've seen some wild stories, but this one, it takes the cake. I never imagined I'd watch a neighborhood HOA, president reduced to tears in front of the cops, just because my wife refused to join her little power club. What started with fake violation notices and threats of lawsuits quickly escalated, but the HOA president had no idea who she was dealing with. When the final HOA meeting came around, everything flipped. Want to know what happened next? Let me know in the comments, because trust me, this story is about to get wild. My wife Olivia and I just bought our dream house in Willowbrook after saving for 8 years. It's one of those picture-perfect suburban neighborhoods with tree-lined streets and manicured lawns where everyone waves at each other. Olivia works for the government, that's all most people need to know. She's calm, incredibly observant, and has this sixth sense about people that comes from years of dealing with dangerous situations. Me, I'm Alex, a 28-year-old cybersecurity engineer who prefers Xbox controllers to social drama. I had always assumed suburban life would be mind-numbingly predictable, but something told me Nancy's energy seemed to promise anything but that. The whole neighborhood felt like a carefully constructed facade, and I was starting to wonder what lay beneath the surface. Our first HOA meeting was held in the community center, one of those beige institutional buildings that somehow manages to suck the soul out of any gathering. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with an irritating persistence, and the cheap folding chairs squeaked every time someone shifted their weight. That's where I met Nancy Thompson and immediately got bad vibes. Picture this, a 55-year-old woman in a perfectly pressed navy suit, blonde hair teased to absolute perfection, and eyes that scan the room like she's personally evaluating everyone's property values. When Nancy walked into that room, every conversation died in an instant. She moved through the crowd with the kind of authority that felt like it was carved into the very walls of this place, an unspoken command that no one dared challenge. There was a strange heaviness in the room, as if the walls were closing in on us, and the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to grow louder as she spoke. The meeting itself was typical HOA, stuffed discussions about garbage pickup schedules, complaints about unleashed dogs, debates over holiday decoration, guidelines. But Nancy ran the whole thing like she was chairing a corporate board meeting. Every time someone raised their hand to speak, she'd give them this look like they were interrupting something far more important. She had this way of nodding along while people talked that made it obvious she wasn't actually listening, just waiting for her turn to shut them down with some arcane rule from the HOA handbook. The other residents seemed genuinely intimidated by her speaking in hushed tones and avoiding direct eye contact. "I trust you've had time to look over our guidelines, Alex," she asked, her voice carrying that same calculated precision that made my skin crawl. When Nancy approached us, conversations literally stopped. She carried herself like she owned the place, which in her mind she probably did. I'm not even sure why I felt so uncomfortable around her at first. There was just something about the way she looked at people, like she was mentally filing away information for later use. Her smile never reached her eyes, and there was this predatory quality to her movements that reminded me of a shark circling its prey. Olivia leaned over and whispered, her voice barely audible, "Do you feel it too?" Something about her doesn't sit right. The words sent a cold shiver down my spine. I thought Olivia might be overthinking things, but something in the back of my mind nudged me to take her seriously. My wife had dealt with dangerous people before, and if she was getting warning signals, maybe I should pay attention. Right there in the middle of the meeting, Nancy made her move on us. "Olivia, with your government background, you'd be absolutely perfect as our HOA secretary. We desperately need someone who understands complex documentation and procedures." The way she said government background made it sound like she already knew way more about my wife than she should have. How could she possibly know about Olivia's work? We'd never mentioned it to anyone in the neighborhood. Olivia looked at me, then at Nancy, her polite smile barely hiding the discomfort. Olivia's refusal was sharp and controlled. "I appreciate the offer, but my job demands far more flexibility than any HOA could ever require." She didn't mention the FBI, but I could see the silent warning in her eyes. There was a tension building in the room that I couldn't quite identify, but it felt dangerous. Olivia's refusal didn't seem to surprise Nancy, but the coldness in her response made my stomach churn. I caught the briefest flicker of something darker beneath her smile. "I trust you'll reconsider your decision. Willowbrook thrives on participation, and those who choose to opt out tend to find their lives inconveniently complicated. That wasn't a suggestion, it was a straight-up threat. As Nancy leaned in slightly, her voice dropping a pitch, I felt the weight of her words press into me, almost like a warning. The other residents in the room had gone completely silent, as if they knew exactly what kind of complications Nancy was referring to. I actually had to stop and stare at her after that one. Who talks to new neighbors like that? After the meeting, Nancy cornered us by the exit door, like a predator who'd spotted vulnerable prey. You know, Olivia, I've been president here for 6 years now. I've learned that some people need a little more encouragement to become proper team players. The way she said encouragement made my skin crawl. There was something deeply unsettling about her tone, like she was sharing some kind of inside joke that only she understood. Walking home that night, Olivia said something that stuck with me. Alex, that woman has never been told no in her entire life, and I have a feeling she's not going to handle rejection very well. I wanted to believe Nancy was just some overzealous neighborhood busybody, but deep down, I knew Olivia was right. There was something genuinely menacing about the way Nancy had looked at us like we were problems that needed to be solved. Later that evening, I was getting a drink from the kitchen when I glanced out our window. There was Nancy standing at her upstairs window with a pair of binoculars staring directly at our house. When she realized I was looking back, she didn't even try to hide what she was doing. She just kept watching us with those binoculars, like it was the most normal thing in the world. The sight sent chills down my spine. Who does that to their neighbors? I called Olivia over to see, but by the time she got to the window, Nancy had disappeared. Did I just imagine that, or was our neighbor actually spying on us with binoculars? I asked. The whole situation felt surreal, like we'd stumbled into some kind of twisted suburban nightmare. As we left the meeting, a business card appeared on our doorstep with a note, "Just wanted to follow up on our conversation. Looking forward to your reconsideration." What planet was this woman from? Who leaves business cards at people's houses like some kind of door-to-door salesperson? I showed it to Olivia, who just shook her head. "She's marking territory," my wife said. "This is her way of letting us know she's watching and won't be giving up easily." I had to admit the whole thing felt more like psychological warfare than neighborhood politics. The card itself was expensive looking, with embossed lettering that probably cost more than most people spend on groceries. Nancy was clearly willing to invest serious money in whatever game she was playing with us. Looking back now, I should have realized that Nancy Thompson wasn't just your typical control freak. She was someone who'd never been told no in her entire life, and I had absolutely no idea how far she'd be willing to go to change that. 3 days after that awkward first meeting, Nancy called our house. Nancy's voice was too sweet, too rehearsed. "Olivia's darling, we have an amazing new project, and your expertise could make all the difference." She made it sound like a favor, but I knew better. There was something hidden in her words. The way she lingered on certain phrases, the calculated pauses in her speech, everything about the call felt orchestrated. Despite her growing suspicions, Olivia agreed to go. She wanted to see exactly what Nancy was really planning. I offered to come along, but Olivia said she could handle whatever Nancy was plotting. I tried to brush it off as just another empty gesture, but deep down I knew this was more than just a polite invite. It was the eye of the storm. Maybe I should have insisted on going with her, but I trusted Olivia's judgment. Nancy's house looked like something straight out of a home decor magazine. Everything pristine, perfectly arranged, and somehow cold, despite all the expensive furniture. Every surface gleamed with an almost unnatural perfection, as if no one actually lived there. She'd prepared this elaborate tea service with expensive china and pastries arranged like we were visiting actual royalty. The whole setup felt theatrical, like Nancy was performing some kind of elaborate charade. "Please do make yourself comfortable," Nancy cooed, draped in pearls and a floral dress that likely cost more than my entire month's paycheck. "I'm just so excited to share my vision with someone of your caliber and experience." The way she kept emphasizing words like caliber and experience felt loaded with hidden meaning that I couldn't quite figure out at the time. Her gestures were too practiced, too deliberate, like she'd rehearsed this entire encounter. Here's the thing, Nancy didn't mention any community garden project. Not once. Instead, she launched into this detailed presentation about all the amazing achievements the HOA had accomplished under her leadership, constantly emphasizing how she'd maintained property values and eliminated problematic residents. I mean, who uses the phrase eliminated problematic residents in casual conversation? That's not normal neighbor talk, right? The way she said it made my blood run cold when Olivia described it to me later. Olivia later revealed that Nancy had an entire photo album prepared before and after shots, documenting every improvement she'd forced upon the neighborhood. It felt more like a sales pitch than a friendly chat about gardening. The photos were meticulously organized with detailed notes written in Nancy's precise handwriting, documenting every change like some kind of obsessive surveillance project. The photo album was genuinely disturbing when Olivia described it to me later. Nancy had documented every single change made to every house in the neighborhood over the past 6 years. She knew which families had painted their trim, who'd installed new mailboxes, even who'd changed their landscaping, without getting proper HOA approval first. It was like she'd been conducting surveillance on the entire community and keeping detailed records of everyone's compliance or lack thereof. Some of the photos looked like they'd been taken from hidden vantage points, suggesting Nancy had been systematically spying on her neighbors for years. She showed me pictures of houses where families used to live, Olivia explained. Families who decided to relocate after Nancy helped them understand the importance of community standards. The way Nancy talked about these displaced families was chilling, like they were statistics rather than real people with real lives. I could see her mask slipping just for a moment. You know, Olivia, we really need someone who understands procedures. You could be a real asset to our community. Her tone had shifted from friendly to something much sharper. When Olivia politely declined again, Nancy's entire approach shifted dramatically. I think you might be underestimating the situation here, dear. A person with your obvious capabilities really shouldn't be standing on the sidelines. Some people avoid taking on responsibility because they're well uncertain about their actual abilities. Nancy was straight up trying to manipulate Olivia by attacking her competence and sense of duty. The insult was subtle but unmistakable, designed to provoke exactly the kind of defensive response Nancy was hoping for. But Olivia had dealt with far more sophisticated manipulation tactics in her professional life. Olivia's eyes didn't waver from Nancy's, but I could tell this wasn't her first fight of this kind. I appreciate the offer, but my career requires my full attention, she said with an edge I hadn't heard before. Then Nancy dropped her friendly mask completely. Let me be completely frank with you, Olivia. Families who choose not to cooperate with our community standards often find themselves encountering various complications with HOA regulations. I would absolutely hate to see something like that happen to you and Alex. That's when Olivia knew for certain that we were dealing with someone genuinely dangerous, not just annoying. The threat was delivered with such casual confidence that it was clear Nancy had made similar threats before, probably many times. Her comfort with intimidation suggested years of practice at getting her way through fear. As Nancy handed Olivia a brochure, I noticed her fingers were trembling ever so slightly. Was it a sign of frustration or something deeper? Olivia's response was like steel wrapped in silk. If any issues were to arise, I'm completely confident we could resolve them through proper legal channels and transparent communication. For just a split second, Nancy's carefully constructed mask slipped completely. Her eyes flashed with pure anger before she forced another fake smile back onto her face. Olivia raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Was it paranoia, or was Nancy hiding something? The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, and both women seemed to be engaged in some kind of psychological chess match that I couldn't fully understand. Nancy's reaction to the mention of legal channels was particularly telling, like she had specific reasons to avoid official scrutiny. Walking home afterward, I asked Olivia, "What do you think that was really about?" The garden thing was obviously fake. Olivia's jaw was tight with tension. She just threatened us, Alex. Nancy Thompson is clearly used to getting her way through intimidation and manipulation. And when people like her feel their authority being challenged, they tend to escalate things very quickly. I wanted to believe we could just ignore Nancy and live our lives peacefully, but something told me that wasn't going to be an option. So, what exactly do we do about it? I asked. Olivia's expression was grim. We document absolutely everything from this point forward and prepare ourselves for whatever she decides to throw at us next. The professional tone in her voice reminded me that my wife dealt with dangerous people for a living. Just as we were about to leave, Nancy's smile faltered. "I hope you understand," she said, her eyes narrowing. "This is about more than just HOA politics. People who don't fit in here, they often find themselves removed." The word removed hung in the air like a threat, and the way Nancy said it made it clear she wasn't talking about voluntary relocations. Walking home that evening, I couldn't shake this overwhelming feeling that we'd just been officially declared war on by someone who played a completely different game than normal people, and I wasn't sure we understood the rules yet. Exactly 1 week after that tense tea meeting, an official HOA notice appeared in our mailbox like some kind of legal booby trap. When I saw the notice, my first instinct was to laugh. How could they fine us for something so ridiculous? But then I noticed the details. It wasn't just a petty grievance, it was a message, a warning. Our rosebush allegedly violated height restrictions for street-side landscaping, and we were being hit with a penalty of $100 per day until we corrected the violation. I wasn't just annoyed, I was starting to feel hunted. I was livid. This rosebush is barely 3 feet tall. How can they call this a violation? The more I stared at the notice, the more I realized this wasn't about landscaping, it was about control power, and Nancy's desperate need to show us who was really in charge of this neighborhood. The violation notice was impressively official, looking complete with HOA, letterhead, case numbers, and references to specific sections of the community guidelines. Nancy had clearly put serious effort into making this look legitimate. She'd even included photographs of our rosebush taken from different angles, with measurements and annotations like she was building a criminal case. It would have been almost admirable if it wasn't completely insane. The photos were time-stamped and professionally formatted, suggesting Nancy had invested considerable resources into this harassment campaign. I kept staring at the papers, trying to figure out how someone could put this much work into harassing their neighbors. I honestly couldn't believe someone would stoop to making up fake violations just to harass their neighbors. But here was the evidence printed on expensive paper, with official seals that probably cost more to produce than our actual rosebush. Olivia didn't say a word for a moment, just stared at the paper with cold, calculating eyes. Finally, she broke the silence. "Alex, we need to make sure this isn't just the beginning." Her voice was calm, but the weight behind it hit me like a ton of bricks. She sat down at our kitchen table and started studying the massive 200-page HOA rulebook like she was analyzing evidence from a criminal case, which in a way she basically was. I wanted to brush it off, tell her we were overthinking things. But deep down, I could feel it too. This wasn't just about some rosebush. This was Nancy's opening move in whatever twisted game she was playing, and I had the sinking feeling that things were about to get much worse. The methodical way she approached the problem reminded me that my wife was trained to deal with people far more dangerous than suburban HOA presidents. "Alex, come look at this," she said, after about an hour pointing to a specific paragraph. Section 15.3 clearly states that height restrictions only apply to plantings within 2 meters of the street curb. Our rosebush is positioned exactly 3.7 meters from the curb. I had to admit, watching my wife methodically dismantle Nancy's fake violation was pretty impressive. "Wait, you actually read through that entire book?" I asked, genuinely amazed. "It's a professional habit. You always need to know the rules before someone tries to use them as weapons against you." That's my wife, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Her approach was systematic and thorough, documenting every relevant section and cross-referencing related clauses, like she was preparing for a court case. The precision of her work made me realize that Nancy had picked a fight with someone who was professionally trained to handle exactly this kind of bureaucratic warfare. Olivia spent the next few hours crafting a response with surgical precision, dissecting every flaw in their complaint, as if she were preparing for trial. She included exact citations of the relevant sections with specific page numbers, attached photographs clearly showing the measured distances from our rosebush to the street, and concluded with this perfectly polite but devastating line: "I trust the board will review this matter thoroughly and perhaps consider developing updated resident education materials to prevent similar misunderstandings in the future." That last sentence was pure diplomatic genius, basically calling Nancy incompetent while sounding completely professional and helpful. The email was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive professionalism, designed to publicly embarrass Nancy while providing her no grounds for retaliation. I watched Olivia work and realized that Nancy had seriously underestimated who she was dealing with. 2 days later, the HOA sent a retraction along with a meek apology for the administrative error that had somehow slipped through the cracks. I was celebrating our victory, but Olivia looked genuinely worried. Nancy just got publicly embarrassed by someone she tried to intimidate. "That's going to make her incredibly dangerous, Alex." Nancy had learned the fine art of pushing someone to the edge, all while looking like the concerned neighbor. But every word she said felt like it had a hidden agenda beneath it. But when Olivia responded, her voice calm yet unwavering, I could see Nancy's smug smile flicker just for a moment. She wasn't used to being challenged, and I think she was starting to realize we weren't backing down. The retraction notice was brief and clearly written through gritted teeth, suggesting that Nancy was furious about being forced to admit her mistake publicly. I could only imagine how humiliated she must have felt, and that worried me more than the original violation notice. The very next day, another HOA notice appeared this time, claiming our exterior paint color violates community aesthetic standards. Our house was painted the exact same beige color as half the neighborhood. What was Nancy's next move going to be, complaining that our grass was too green? I showed the notice to Olivia, who just shook her head and started taking more photographs for our growing evidence file. "She's testing us," my wife explained, "seeing how many fake violations she can throw at us before we either give up and move away or make a mistake she can use against us." The escalation was becoming obvious. Nancy was throwing everything she could think of at us, hoping something would stick. Each new violation was more ridiculous than the last, but they were all formatted with the same professional precision that made them look legitimate at first glance. The next morning, the mailman arrived with another notice. This time, it was about our mailbox. I couldn't help but feel like we were being suffocated one ridiculous violation at a time, but this time I wasn't going to back down. I knew things were about to get real. The pattern was clear now. Nancy was conducting a systematic campaign of harassment using official HOA channels to make our lives miserable. Each violation was designed to cost us time, money, and emotional energy, slowly wearing us down until we either gave up and moved away or made some kind of mistake she could exploit. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop wondering if we'd just won an important battle or accidentally started a war that we weren't remotely prepared to fight. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon, the kind where you forget the outside world exists. I was lounging on the couch, lost in my game, while Olivia's pasta sauce simmered in the kitchen, filling the house with a comforting aroma, until a knock at the door shattered that peace. I thought it was just a normal Saturday afternoon until the knock came. Not the friendly kind, but one that carried a weight I couldn't shake. When I heard it again, I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Something was off. Then came this rapid, aggressive knocking at our front door that immediately put both of us on high alert. As Olivia moved toward the door, I caught her eyes, and for the first time I saw the same unease I was feeling reflected in her gaze. She wasn't expecting guests. Neither was I. 2 police officers stood on our porch, their faces stone cold and unreadable, as if they'd stepped out of a crime drama, all business and no warmth. Their serious expressions didn't match the casual setting. The officers' faces were stone cold, not a flicker of warmth or familiarity. "We've received a report from Ms. Thompson about suspicious activity," Officer Johnson said, his voice clipped, like he had rehearsed it too many times. His eyes flickered nervously over the yard, as if expecting to find something more dangerous than a few backyard BBQs. Behind them, I could see a patrol car parked in our driveway, with its lights still flashing. "Good afternoon, sir. I'm Officer Johnson. This is Officer Davis. We've received a detailed report from Nancy Thompson regarding some suspicious activities at this address. I knew something wasn't right. This was beyond a neighborhood dispute, but what could they possibly want from us?" Officer Davis consulted his notepad, like he was reading from a crime report. "Ms. Thompson reported unusual chemical odors and excessively loud noises coming from your residence throughout the week. She's expressed serious concerns about possible illegal activities taking place." I almost started laughing. The only chemical odor in our house was Olivia's vanilla-scented candle, and the excessively loud noises were probably the sound effects from my video games. But laughing at police officers probably wasn't the smartest response, even when their complaints were completely ridiculous. I couldn't believe Nancy had actually called the police on us. What exactly was she hoping to accomplish here? The whole situation felt surreal, like we'd been transported into some kind of twisted reality show. Olivia stood next to me at the door, her posture calm, but I could see the sharp focus in her eyes. She was ready to handle this, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice too composed for someone facing off with 2 officers. I could sense the shift. The air between us thickened. They were listening now, hanging on her every word. "Good afternoon, officers. I believe there might be some kind of misunderstanding here. Officer Johnson continued reading from his notes. Ms. Thompson also mentioned ongoing violations of HOA, regulations, and persistent non-compliance with community standards. She's genuinely concerned about overall neighborhood safety and security. Nancy had actually told the police that we were dangerous because we wouldn't join her HOA board. My heart skipped a beat as I watched the officers exchange a look. Suddenly, they weren't the ones in control. Olivia spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear, "Honey, thank goodness. I managed to finish submitting that international weapons trafficking case report yesterday." This would have been really inconvenient timing otherwise. Both police officers' heads immediately snapped up, suddenly very interested in what my wife had just said. You could literally see their entire demeanor shift, from responding to a complaint to wait. "What did she just say?" Officer Davis asked carefully. "Excuse me, ma'am, do you happen to work in law enforcement?" I've shared stories like this on other platforms before, but witnessing this kind of power shift firsthand was absolutely surreal. Without missing a beat, Olivia pulled out her eye, her voice steady. "Special Agent in charge, Olivia Miller, FBI Pacific Northwest Division." She didn't flinch as the officer's eyes widened in recognition. "I believe Ms. Thompson may have provided you with some inaccurate information. Filing false police reports can potentially constitute obstruction of justice under federal law." The transformation in both officers was immediate and dramatic. They straightened up like they were suddenly addressing their commanding officer rather than responding to a neighbor complaint. "Officer Johnson," with his tone completely changed, "Agent Miller, we sincerely apologize for this incident and any inconvenience we've caused. We'll definitely need to have a serious conversation with Ms. Thompson about the accuracy of her reports." Officer Davis quickly added, "Is there anything specific you need us to address regarding this situation, ma'am?" Olivia remained completely professional but firm. "I trust you'll handle this matter appropriately. False reporting wastes valuable police resources that could be used for actual emergencies." Across the street, Nancy watched the whole thing unfold from her upstairs window, her face a mixture of disbelief and simmering rage. She had just realized she'd pushed too far. When she saw both police officers treating Olivia with obvious respect and deference instead of arresting us, her face went completely white. She had just realized that she hadn't been picking on some random new neighbors. She'd been systematically harassing a federal law enforcement officer. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The look of absolute horror on Nancy's face was almost worth all the harassment we'd endured. After the officers left, I stared at my wife in complete amazement. "You just made that entire situation completely disappear with one sentence." Olivia smiled grimly. "Alex, I deal with actual dangerous criminals every single day. Nancy Thompson is just a neighborhood bully who finally picked the absolutely wrong target." But I could see the concern in her eyes despite her confident words. "But now, she knows exactly who you are. Won't that just make everything much worse?" I asked. Olivia's expression grew seriously concerned. When bullies get exposed like this, they typically don't back down immediately. They usually get much more desperate first. Nancy's about to escalate this situation to a completely different level. As the officers left, I couldn't shake the feeling that Nancy was just getting started. The way they looked at each other told me this wouldn't end here. They had underestimated Olivia, and she knew it. But the worst part was, I had the feeling Nancy was about to escalate things even further. What would you do if someone called the cops on you for absolutely nothing? Because I had this terrible sinking feeling that Nancy's desperation was about to take us somewhere much darker and more dangerous than fake violation notices and intimidation tactics. Tuesday afternoon, an envelope arrived, thick, heavy, and embossed with a seal that made my stomach drop. This wasn't a simple warning, it was a direct challenge. I tore it open with trembling hands, only to be met with a cold, harsh demand: pay $5,000 or face a lawsuit. My first thought was, is this a joke? But the seriousness of the letter hit me all at once. 4 days after the police incident, we received an official letter from Morrison & Associates legal firm that felt like a legal bomb exploding in our mailbox. They were demanding exactly $5,000 in penalties for community disruption, willful failure to comply with HOA regulations, and deliberate interference with board operations. The threat was crystal clear: pay the money within 7 days or face a full lawsuit in county court. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just some bureaucratic nonsense. They were serious, and they weren't going to back down. $5,000. I snapped, the absurdity hitting me like a slap. For what? For living in our own house and not bowing to her so-called club. I couldn't believe Nancy had actually hired a lawyer to come after us. This felt like something out of a crazy legal drama, not real life in suburban America. The legal letter was impressively intimidating, filled with dense paragraphs of legalese and references to obscure HOA, statutes that I'd never heard of. Morrison had clearly done his homework, crafting arguments that sounded authoritative and threatening to anyone who didn't actually understand the law. He claimed we'd caused measurable financial harm to community property values and created an atmosphere of discord that threatens neighborhood stability. If I hadn't been married to someone who actually knows federal law, I probably would have been terrified enough to just pay the money. Olivia didn't flinch. Her gaze was laser-focused as she dissected the letter, flipping through it with the precision of a surgeon. "This is a bluff," she said quietly, "but they want us to back down. We're not giving them the satisfaction." While I was having a complete panic attack about legal fees, Olivia went into full investigation mode. For 2 straight days, Olivia combed through every detail about David Morrison, his background, his weaknesses, leaving no stone unturned. She researched everything. Only 3 years out of law school, specializes primarily in real estate disputes, currently trying to make partner at his firm, and has a documented track record of backing down when faced with experienced legal opposition. I watched as she pulled out her laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'll find the loopholes. I'll dismantle this." The calm in her voice made me feel safer. "He's exactly the type of lawyer Nancy would choose," Olivia explained. "Young, hungry, probably desperate for billable hours, and completely unaware that he's about to go up against someone who actually knows federal law better than he does." I had to admit, watching my wife systematically analyze our opponent was pretty reassuring. I wanted to help, but my mind kept going back to Nancy. I couldn't shake the image of her face when Olivia shut her down at the last HOA meeting. She was ruthless, and now she was pulling out the big guns. Olivia crafted a response letter that was absolutely masterful in its legal precision. She didn't write as an angry homeowner getting picked on. She wrote as a seasoned legal professional who knew exactly what she was doing. Her letter methodically dismantled their demands piece by piece, leaving no room for retaliation. She pointed out 4 basic legal errors in their penalty calculations, referenced the specific case law regarding homeowner rights and HOA limitations, and included this subtle but crystal clear message about Morrison's career ambitions. "I trust that an attorney of your obvious caliber wouldn't want to pursue a case that lacks solid legal foundation, especially considering the potential impact on your professional reputation and partnership prospects." That last line was pure genius, basically threatening his career without actually making any direct threats. She also included her FBI business card and a brief professional summary, not showing off or bragging, just establishing her credentials as someone who definitely knows federal law. As I watched Olivia focus on her screen, I felt a sinking realization. We were in over our heads. Morrison called the next day, his tone now apologetic, almost embarrassed, an immediate shift from the aggressive stance in his letter. "Agent Miller, upon much more thorough review of this matter, we believe there has been a significant misunderstanding here. We're immediately withdrawing all financial demands and sincerely apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused." There was a brief pause, and then, "And if you ever find yourself needing any legal services in the future, please don't hesitate to contact our office." I could barely contain my laughter at that shameless attempt to turn this disaster into a networking opportunity. But the most interesting part came after Morrison officially withdrew the lawsuit threat. Olivia asked him directly, "Out of curiosity, how exactly did Ms. Thompson compensate your firm for this matter?" Morrison hesitated before answering. "She paid in cash, very unusual even for someone like her." 2 days later, we received another letter. This time, the stakes were higher, $10,000. The message was clear: pay or else. I could hear the clock ticking each second, drawing us closer to something that felt far worse than just a fine. But this wasn't from Morrison. This was from a different law firm entirely. Nancy was shopping around for lawyers, apparently willing to pay multiple retainer fees to find someone who would take her case. Cash payment for legal services. That struck both of us as extremely suspicious. Why would Nancy pay lawyers in cash unless she was trying to avoid creating a paper trail? What exactly was she trying to hide? Nancy just lost her 2 biggest weapons, police intimidation, and legal threats. When desperate people run out of official options, they typically resort to much dirtier tactics, Olivia had warned me. The next morning, a shadow crossed the driveway. Nancy. She was standing on our porch, her arms folded, her lips twisted in a tight smile. "I trust we're not going to make this any more difficult, are we?" she asked, her voice icy cold. I didn't want to think about what dirtier tactics might mean coming from someone like Nancy Thompson. Like, what exactly, I asked. Olivia's expression was grim. Character assassination. If she can't use official channels to destroy us, she'll try to systematically ruin our reputation throughout the entire community. That same evening, I got a call from my neighbor, 2 houses down. "Hey Alex, I just wanted to give you a heads up. Nancy Thompson has been asking some pretty weird questions about you and your wife." I stared at Nancy, and for the first time I felt a rush of fear. She wasn't just playing a game anymore. This was war. "We have options," Olivia said, but I could tell she was thinking of a way out. I wasn't so sure there was one anymore. "Have you ever had someone try to destroy your reputation when they couldn't beat you fairly? I thought we'd finally won the war, but Olivia's warning kept echoing in my head, and I was about to learn exactly how vicious Nancy could get when she felt completely cornered. At first I brushed it off as just idle gossip, but then I discovered the private group Nancy had created, Willowbrook Community Safety. It was a calculated, systematic smear campaign targeting us one post at a time. Unable to win through any official channels, Nancy launched an all-out social media warfare campaign that was both sophisticated and absolutely vicious. She systematically invited most of our neighbors to join. Each post, each comment was like a calculated shot. She didn't name us directly, but the message was clear: we were the dangerous outsiders who had to be watched. The posts were subtle but venomous, crafted to look innocent while casting a long shadow of suspicion. When federal agents live among us, how can we be sure our privacy is safe? And are we compromising our privacy by letting outsiders into our tight-knit community? She didn't say our names, but the implications were there. Nancy was basically painting us as dangerous government agents who were threatening the entire neighborhood. She shared articles about government overreach and surveillance state concerns, subtly implying that our presence put everyone at risk. The whole campaign was designed to make our neighbors genuinely afraid of us. I could feel the weight of every word she posted like 1,000 small knives driving into my chest. This was more than just a neighborhood dispute. It was a campaign designed to destroy our lives. I tried to ignore the rumors, but they crept into every conversation, like a slow poison spreading through the neighborhood. People were whispering behind our backs, avoiding us on the street. Mrs. Patterson, who had always waved at me before, now crossed the street to avoid me. The mailman wouldn't make eye contact. We were slowly being driven out by whispers and suspicion. Within just 2 weeks, the change in our neighborhood atmosphere was absolutely dramatic and heartbreaking. Delivery drivers started asking for extra address verification, like they were nervous about coming to our house. Children who once played near our yard now crossed the street, at the sight of us, their parents pulling them inside with wary eyes. I felt like the walls were closing in, and Nancy had set the stage. Everyone I had waved at in the neighborhood now turned their backs. One evening I found Olivia staring out the window, her eyes following the neighborhood kids who used to wave at us. Now, they passed by in silence, avoiding even our dog. I could feel her pain without her saying a word. "Hey, you okay?" I asked, sitting down beside her. She was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Alex, I have personally faced down international arms dealers, organized crime bosses, and domestic terrorists. But being genuinely hated by my own neighbors based on completely fabricated lies, it hurts way more than I ever expected it would." I could hear the pain in her voice, and it made me absolutely furious at Nancy for what she was doing to us. The worst part was knowing that none of our neighbors were bothering to verify any of these rumors. But Olivia isn't the type to stay defeated. By the next morning, her resolve was steel, and she was already researching Nancy's past, determined to find the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. "I'm completely done playing defense, Alex. It's time to find out exactly what Nancy Thompson is really trying to hide from everyone." Olivia dove into Nancy's past with the precision of a seasoned investigator, uncovering a trail of manipulated HOA, elections, and neighbors forced to leave after challenging her rule. She found 3 other families who'd been strongly encouraged to leave the neighborhood after having conflicts with Nancy. She discovered that Nancy had systematically manipulated 2 recent HOA elections by disqualifying opposing candidates on bogus technicalities. Most importantly, she found significant irregularities and unexplained discrepancies in the HOA's financial records. My cybersecurity background finally came in handy for something important. We found some seriously disturbing patterns expenses that didn't match any actual work performed vendor payments to companies that didn't seem to exist anywhere, and maintenance costs that were suspiciously and unreasonably high. "Alex, look at this carefully," Olivia said, pointing at her laptop screen with growing excitement. "Nancy claims the HOA spent exactly $8,000 on landscape renovation last year, but I contacted the actual contractor, and they only charged $3,500 for the work. Where did that extra $4,500 actually go? And look here, $5,000, supposedly for community center roof repair. But I drove over there yesterday and personally inspected it. That roof hasn't been touched or repaired in years." She's not just some power-hungry control freak, Olivia realized with growing anger. She's an actual thief. And she's been using intimidation and harassment to silence anyone who might start questioning her finances. The pattern was everywhere once we knew what to look for. Inflated invoices for services that were never provided, phantom vendors that existed only on paper maintenance projects that were approved and paid for, but never actually completed. Nancy had been stealing from her neighbors for years, probably funding her expensive lifestyle with money that should have gone toward actual community improvements. No wonder she was so desperate to maintain control of the HOA. She needed to keep people from looking too closely at where all that money had really gone. As I stood there staring at the empty yard, I realized that the neighborhood wasn't just turning on us. It had already happened, and I couldn't stop it. But Olivia had a plan, or so she said. Staring at those damning financial records spread across our kitchen table, I realized we weren't just dealing with a power-hungry HOA president anymore. We'd accidentally stumbled onto criminal activity that could send Nancy Thompson to federal prison. I had been dreading this moment. Nancy had built her empire on fear and manipulation, positioning herself as the undisputed queen of Willowbrook. Now she was about to use her annual HOA speech to cement her control. The HOA annual meeting was Nancy's biggest moment to shine each year, her chance to deliver the state of the community address and bask in everyone's appreciation. She walked into the community center wearing her most expensive poro suit, carrying a thick folder of prepared remarks, looking completely confident that she still controlled the entire narrative. Nancy had no idea what was coming. She had done this before, coming in with her cold smile, her sense of superiority, and now it was our turn to pay. I sat there listening to her lies and manipulation, knowing that everything was about to change in the next few minutes. Nancy's opening speech hit all her usual talking points about community achievements and maintaining our high standards while taking not-so-subtle digs at the uncooperative residents who refused to participate in our shared vision, obviously meaning us. Nancy talked about fiscal responsibility and transparent governance with the kind of confidence that only comes from years of getting away with exactly the opposite. She presented charts showing how community funds had been efficiently allocated and how property values had remained stable under responsible leadership. Every word out of her mouth was basically a confession to the crimes we'd discovered. After finishing her self-congratulatory presentation, she opened the floor for questions with a smug smile that I couldn't wait to see disappear. Olivia rose with unshakable composure, her voice cutting through the room like a blade, her words measured yet loaded with purpose. "I have some important questions about financial transparency and accountability in our HOA operations." Nancy's smile tightened noticeably, but she maintained her confident facade. "Of course, dear. We're completely transparent about everything we do here." You could hear the condescension dripping from her voice. I watched Nancy's face carefully, looking for any sign that she suspected what was coming next. "That's wonderful to hear," Olivia said, walking purposefully toward the front of the room with her laptop bag. "Then I'm sure you won't mind helping me explain some significant discrepancies I've discovered." The room got very quiet very quickly, as people sensed that something important was about to happen. Olivia hooked her laptop to the projector with a calm efficiency, revealing her evidence in a calculated step-by-step breakdown that could only be described as a surgical dissection of Nancy's crimes. The first slide appeared on the screen, Our 2023 budget shows $75,000 collected from all residents and $73,000 in reported expenses. That seems remarkably efficient. However, we apparently spent $8,000 on landscape renovation. But when I contacted the actual contractor, they confirmed they only charged $3,500 for all the work performed. Can someone explain where that extra $4,500 went? I could see Nancy's face going pale as she realized exactly what was happening. This wasn't just some angry neighbor asking questions. This was a federal law enforcement officer presenting a criminal case. $5,000 was allocated for community center roof repair. But, as everyone can clearly see, no repair work has ever been done to this roof. Interestingly, here's a credit card statement showing a $5,000 luxury spa package purchased by Nancy Thompson on exactly the same date. The room erupted into shocked murmurs as people started putting the pieces together. Olivia continued her presentation with the cold precision of an FBI briefing bank statements, clearly showing Nancy's signatures on completely unauthorized withdrawals, fake invoices created for non-existent community improvement projects, personal luxury purchases systematically disguised as legitimate HOA, expenses and credit card receipts proving Nancy had been funding her expensive lifestyle with stolen community money. Slide after slide of damning evidence appeared on the screen, each one more devastating than the last. Nancy's smug demeanor evaporated in real time, replaced by a frantic desperation as the weight of the evidence crushed her. This is absolutely ridiculous. She's completely fabricating evidence to get revenge, because I wouldn't tolerate her disruptive behavior. But her voice was shaking, and everyone could see the guilt written all over her face. Olivia's response was ice cold and completely professional. These are official bank records with your signature. Nancy, these are credit card receipts with your name and account information. Would you like to formally challenge the authenticity of these documents in a court of law? The entire room erupted into shocked conversations as residents who'd been quietly enduring Nancy's tyranny for years suddenly found their voices and started connecting all the dots about her years of financial manipulation. Mrs. Patterson stood up angrily. So, that's exactly why our pool maintenance fees doubled over 2 years, while the actual pool service got progressively worse. A man from the back shouted, "You told us the new playground equipment was delayed due to budget constraints, but you were actually stealing that money for personal spa treatments." Olivia delivered the final blow with chilling precision. As a sworn federal officer, I am legally obligated to report financial crimes, especially when they affect an entire community. This complete evidence package will be formally submitted to the District Attorney's Office and the IRS for thorough criminal investigation. Nancy made one last desperate attempt. Please don't do this. I'll pay every penny back immediately. Please don't completely destroy my entire life. But it was way too late for apologies and bargaining. Nancy thought she could control everything, but she never saw what was coming. In just a week, her empire crumbled under the weight of her own corruption. Arrested, imprisoned, and stripped of everything, Nancy learned the hard way that messing with the wrong person has consequences. The community of Willowbrook was forever changed, freed from her grip of fear. Maybe the real lesson here is that some battles are worth fighting, even when you least expect them. If you've stuck with us this far, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit that thanks button to show your support. Thanks for hanging out. Catch you in the next one.
From all of us here at QA Stories, thank you for watching. Smash that like button, drop a comment, and join us again for more unbelievable stories.